Okay, welcome. Welcome everybody to today's gathering of Temple of the New Atlantis. Really excited to have you here and excited about today's topic. Something that I get to share, a process I get to share with all of you that if you're listening right now, it must be on your radar too. um, Jana and I have been going through a process over the last few months of correcting our status, we'll call it. And there's going to be a lot of information that we're going to pass to you today. So take notes if you need to. And then you'll also be able to reach out to both of us if you want to with questions afterwards. So anytime I endorse, a product or a service or a person, it's because I have specific personal experience that has allowed me to endorse or to support or decide that I want to bring this forward to my temple community. So as always, with any information that you get, with anything that I say or anybody else says, you are your own divine sovereign authority. Because I endorse it or I feel in alignment with it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is right for you. So always use your discernment, always educate yourself, always ask questions. I am simply here, and Jana is simply here today to pass information, because if you don't know what's available to you, you don't know that you can make a change, right? And traditionally in this world, we are denied so much information. Like there is just so much out there that we are not told. We're taught a very compartmentalized, in the box way of life and the way of moving through life. And so most of us really have no idea until somebody brings to our attention that, there's a completely other timeline or other, system that we can enter into that is outside of what we've been taught by our parents and our grandparents and what we've passed along to our children, because we just didn't know. Right? And that we don't know. I mean, it's purposeful that we don't know. It's intentional that we don't know. So the good thing about technology and the information age, all these things that happened, is like information can be shared so much easily and readily and spread very, very, very quickly. And so we have this technology like, Zoom, where I can come together with all of you and I can bring to the table something that might help you out in life. I've known Jana for about 10 plus years. We've had a very interesting and ever evolving relationship as, friends and as compadres and contemporaries and healers and teachers together. And when I reached out to her, kind of randomly last October, and we came into communication, I said, Jana, I've been recently exploring this whole thing about our birth certificates and about, how we're kind of in this slave system. I said, do you know about that? She's like, yeah, actually, I have heard a little bit about that. And I said, well, are you aware that we can stop doing that and we can do something else? She's like, well, I actually think I know somebody who might have done that. And let me check with them. And Jana's very good. She's a good researcher. She has an extremely sharp memory for memorizing facts. Like for me and my Pisces brain, if you tell me something, I might retain. I'm so right-brained. I will retain like some of the information, but I have a hard time unless I see, read, hear something over and over again, getting it committed to memory. Jana has this very great way of hearing or reading something, and all of a sudden it clicks in for her, and she can talk about it very succinctly and very intelligently and clearly. So I decide, as she and I went through this exploration process of what does it mean to become what's called an American state national, opposed to a United States citizen, okay, which we are all born into. You are an American state national from the moment you're born until the moment your parents sign you off on your birth certificate. They click that box of you being a United States citizen and them being a United States citizen, which all sounds well and good, right? It sounds like normal. That's what we're supposed to do. We have discovered what that box checking really means and what it does or what happens to us our parents put us into this system that requires a birth certificate and a social security number. So we're learning a whole new language. We've learned a whole new system and a whole new option of availability that takes us out of what I've discovered is a slave system. And some of you have probably, it's been on your radar that you've opted into what's called a slave system via the IRS, right? Into something that is, hi, Caden, that is puts us deeper into sovereignty. Okay, so when we talk about sovereignty, we're talking about next level sovereignty in a legal system. So I'm going to kind of turn this over to Jana at this point and let her begin to speak about what this all means in the most simplistic but authentic terms that we can. We're going to let you guys ask questions. Okay, you can put questions in the chat. We'll stop and pause for questions. And we're going to do our best just to kind of explain our process, why we did it, why you may want to do it, and ultimately what's in it for you. Okay, so having said all of this, is there anybody at this moment with a hand raised or with anything you want to just sort of speak to since I first started? I'm really excited about what I've done, what I've accomplished. I'm excited about where I need to take the changing of my status to the next level and where I get to try and attempt to lead and teach to emancipate the rest of you also, if you feel that you would like to. There is more than one way to skin a cat, it turns out, in this emancipation system. We're going to share with you our process and what we think. We chose this process because we feel that it has the best infrastructure, should we say, the best, easiest, and honestly least expensive way to get to the goal. It's not the only way, but it's the way we chose and we found out works for us. And that is through the American State Assembly. And with that, I'm going to let Jana just kind of step in and can continue the discussion.
Thank you, Ameera. So hi, everyone. It's nice to meet all of you, and it's an honor to get to speak to such a wonderful group of people, as I know Ameera always gathers around herself. So I want to start with the birth certificate, and I'm going to talk about a few different types of undisclosed contracts that we enter when we engage in registration of some kind. So the first thing I want to point out is the language that is on a birth certificate. So there is a place on the birth certificate where it says informant. And informant is typically where the doctor signs or your midwife signs, or if you were the person providing the information, maybe because you had a home birth where you sign. And this word informant, it sounds on the surface like I'm the person who gave the information. But actually, this means informant in the sense of like an FBI informant. The informant is turning over one person to another. So unknowingly, whoever was the informant on your birth certificate, probably your mother, that's how it is on mine, by signing and registering that birth certificate, turned us over to what is sometimes called the state of state governments or the de facto government, or the corporate government. All of these terms are interchangeable. So I have my birth certificate here. And you notice it's on this special paper. And, I know when I got an official copy, I thought this paper just meant this is an official birth certificate. This is actually called bond paper. It is a specific type of paper that is used for bonds. We were bonded to the government with this birth certificate and with its registration. And I remember when I was a kid, when I was born, my grandfather had bought some bonds for me. If you remember those, you could buy bonds and then later you can turn them in and they're supposed to increase with the rate of inflation. So those bonds were on this same kind of paper.
And a certificate is something that can be bought, sold, or traded. That is the legal definition of a certificate. Bought, sold, or traded.
Yes, thank you, Ameera. Another thing to take note of is at the hospital, the place where the babies are born is called the birth ward. This is because we become a ward of the state through our birth certificate. Our social security number that we were assigned is one of multiple types of numbers called a CUSIP number, which that term itself isn't really important. So when we were born, a loan was taken out from the World Bank by the US Treasury. And ever since our birth certificate was registered, that money has been traded in our name. And you might think, well, how could this have happened and I didn't know about it? Because it's not actually being traded in the name of you, the living woman or living man. It's being traded in the name of you, the corporate fictional entity. The same way that I can have a business where I'm Jana Jones, and then if I want to register my business with the state and become an LLC, then I just become, Jana Jones, the corporation. So essentially what was done is all of our names were taken and used to create a fictional corporate entity. And then that fictional corporate entity is who has been being traded ever since our birth certificate was registered. So there is actually no national debt. We see that number in the newspapers and media, like that goes up, and it freaks us out. What are we going to do? There's so much debt. We actually don't have national debt because there's so much money in those trust accounts that were created for us. We are only made aware of the national debt. We're not made aware of the national credit. It's as though there are two sides of the accounting ledger, right? One side is the credit, one side's the debit. So we were just never shown the credit side. And this tool, you could say, of taking a living man or woman and turning them into a corporate entity actually goes back to the time of the Emperor and Empress Justinian and Theodora of the Roman Empire. And I'm taking some notes on some of these concepts I'm sharing with you so that I can make a page of some links so that you can see more of this information for yourself later on from the sources where I learned it. But this was something called the Justinian Deception because it was under the Emperor Justinian. It was repeated by the Catholic Church during the time of the Crusades. And it was a way to take people's property. Men who were the inheritors of the family property were sent away on the crusade. And then a fictional corporate entity was created in their name. And the church would write that this person has died. Or more accurately, that they are a vessel that was lost at sea. We don't know what happened to them. And well, if they're not here to claim their land, I guess we're just going to have to incorporate it into the body of the church. So this has been done over and over throughout history. It's not a new game. And I think that now, in the age where we can transmit information and communicate with one another so much, that it's just easier in some ways to find it out now. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to go to the Library of Congress, to be able to find some of this out for yourself. So I'll take a pause there, and Ameera, you can let me know if there are questions or what you want to pipe in with.
Go ahead and jump in if anybody's got a question. If not, we'll just keep it moving.
Okay,
Okay, great.
I have a few thoughts.
Yes.
So just to add, how you're explaining it is really good. I've been studying this for 2 years, and you kind of just like summed it up in 10 minutes. So,
great.
This is why I work with Jana.
yeah, you're doing an excellent job with describing this. Thank you. I just have a few things to add based on some things I've learned too. So, this evil elite group that's been tricking us, right, goes back to the Roman law, which is the law that we have now, like you said, but it even goes back further than that, because God gave dominion over the earth, and the Satanists have been trying to fight that ever since that time, even trying to change our DNA, which remove us from that original trust indenture with God. Yeah. So I think it goes even back a little bit further than that, but I like how you started with Roman, because that's where the Roman law corruption came from. And then I just wanted to add to what you said about the certificate, the birth certificate. So a certificate of title is not a superior title. So when they give you a certificate of your birth certificate, they're not giving you the real certificate. They hold that. When you get a certificate of title for your car, you're not holding superior title to your car. They could confiscate your car at any time and hold it until court.
Yeah, as they do.
They do. So anyway, just adding to what you said. Very good.
Thank you so much.
I like the language, like it's helping me to have the language for it too. So it's cool.
Okay, awesome.
And Michelle,
that's a great point.
Oops, sorry. I was going to say Michelle had something also.
I did. I just really quick, because I missed the information. When we become wards of the state or whatever, and they go to take the money out in our name, where did they take that money from?
It was borrowed from the World Bank.
From the, oh, interesting.
The
okay.
IMF.
But is
yes.
So if you were born between 1933 and 1975, they took out a $1 million borrowed money from the World Bank and started this. And then it's just accumulated and gotten a lot of interest since then. And so if you're born after 1975, they haven't needed to borrow any money, and they've paid back everything they borrowed. So it's really, we're all creditors, not debtors, like she said.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So this started in 1930s, 1940s. Do you know, John? I can't remember. Is 1945? I can't remember.
Well, I know that. Yeah, I know. It's either 1931 or 1933, because it was after the Great Depression, which was which was a planned crash. And after that event that caused so many people to be plunged into poverty, then it was a lot easier to get people to sign up for this new thing called a social security number. And that way the bottom can never completely drop out from us anymore. And it's going to be a way to take care of our elders. And people at that time were told that they had to sign up. Well, they had to register. That's the word. They had to register for a social security number in order to be able to get a job. So that was the way to get everyone on board.
And I'm finding that's true. Like, as I'm looking for work, it's hard. I'm just transitioning right now, and it's hard to find work without a social security number. A lot of people don't know about nationals. So that's one thing to be. There is a way, but a lot of people don't know how to do it, and they won't bother with it. So
Well, right, and that's why Ameera and I are choosing to share our journeys and experience, because it's not like, you know, with a lot of government processes or processes within the corporate system where you can go to a website or you can go to an attorney, or there's someone you can call at the state who will send you the form and sign you up. This is something where you have to blaze your own trail in a lot of ways. And as you know, there's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of mis and disinformation. But something I have been told by someone who I trust and who has been living or has been walking the walk as an American state national for years. I don't know the details yet, but she told me that we can essentially claim back our social security number in the same way we claimed back our name. So the social security number at first can appear as a trap or an obstacle, but there's a way that we can claim it back the same way we're claiming back our names. I'm glad you brought up what you did about the certificate of title, right? This was pointed out to me, and it's true. You know, if someone gives you a certificate of title, that means you don't have the title, they do, right? Whoever gave you the certificate of title, they're the ones who have the title, not you. So that, yeah, right, that gets done with our cars. And another way you can use to tell who actually owns this, is it me or is it someone else, is if you pay taxes on it, then you don't actually own it. Another part of the American state national process that you can get yourself to after you go through the initial steps to correct your status is you can claim what is called the land patent of your home and your property, so that you do truly own your property. And that means you don't pay property taxes anymore. And that means that, you know, any kind of agents from the state or corporate government can be prosecuted and are trespassing if they come on your property. You know, no one can come knock on your door and, you know, try to tell you what you have to do with your children, for instance. I know that concerns about the overreach of government agencies such as DHS has been a big motivation for myself to correct my status and that of my children.
That's why I'm saying it too, because I saw that evil firsthand and it happened to me, and I will never let them take me or a family member again.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, I know for myself, you know, my experience with DHS was that anyone can call and say anything about you, and then the worker comes, and it's really a roll of the dice. It's not really about the evidence of if there's abuse or not. It's really a roll of the dice, which worker you get, and whether or not they are going to say that the state should take your kids. And, you know, you think to yourself, well, you know, how can they have the right to do this? They don't have the right to do this. The problem is that in their corporate legal system, actually, they do have the right to do this because your kids became a ward of the state when their birth certificate was registered. So you see, it's this, you know, it's this vicious circle, you know, that we all get trapped in just because we don't know.
We don't know what we are acquiescing to. We don't know.
Undisclosed terms of a contract, an undisclosed contract. So another common example of undisclosed contracts we enter through registration is like when you get married, you know, when you register your marriage, when you have to get a license. So anything that requires a license means it's illegal for you to do it without a license. Wait a second, why is it illegal for me to get married without a license? Right? And really, why do I have to have a license, you know, like to drive a car? Why do I have to have a license to be a massage therapist? Why do I have to have a license to be a medical doctor? Isn't it supposed to be about, you know, if I'm ready for this, if I have the skills and knowledge and training? You know, licensure is something that is only for citizens as well. And licensure and registration typically go hand in hand.
So will you explain real quick, since you brought up citizen, what
Yes.
is a citizen?
Yes. So a citizen is someone who owes a debt to the state. That's why citizens pay income tax. That is why citizens can have, you know, that's why we can have our property and our children taken away. That is why, you know, our sons have to sign up for the selective service, where they can take our children that way. So a citizen is someone who owes a debt to the state.
And the legal definition of citizen is public servant.
Yes.
AKA slave.
Yes. Yes. And this is getting a little bit into some of the minutia, but we've all heard the terms slave or indentured servant, and they're a little bit different. There are basically two entities that at one time or another took over and masqueraded as our government. And one of them is called the municipal, and that one goes back to the Catholic Church. And the other one goes back to the British monarch. And so in one of those governments, we're an indentured servant, and in one of them we're a slave. So they have slightly differing definitions of citizen, but it's basically the same thing. And sometimes you'll hear, I know one of the things I've heard over the years and what I thought were conspiracy circles is that the United States is actually under the control of the Queen and the Pope. And, you know, intuitively, I kind of felt like, well, yeah, I know, I can, you know, yeah, but I didn't know really. But, you know, when you dive into all of this research, that's part of your journey to correct your status and become an American state national, then you understand really in very practical terms that it is the church and the monarchy who is pulling the strings.
Can you go back and repeat that sentence that you said about in one you're a slave and in one you're in something else, and which is which?
Yes. So I'm trying to remember. I think it's that under the papal authority that goes back to the Pope, I think that's the one where you're an indentured servant. And I think under the other one, which is called the British territorial government, I think that's the one where you're considered a slave. Okay.
And one thing, I haven't heard anybody really say this, but I think it's true that when you go to court, you're really in the Queen's court, and lawyers, their bar card is traced back to the Queen, not the US. They're actually, they could be licensed in a state to work in that state, but their bar card goes back to the British Empire, which we fought so hard to get out of. We fought so hard to get out of, and we
never got out of it.
Never got out. Well, we got back into it eventually. Yeah, we didn't really get out of it, like Ameera said, but we don't have to go to war, and our sons don't have to go to war. The war was already fought, and we can just do this paperwork and we can get that same freedom back. We just have to know how. So
yes, I'm glad you brought up the time of the Revolutionary War and how we already fought the Brits, because one important piece of this story is that what we think of as our governments, they're actually supposed to be our public servants. They're supposed to be serving us. And here's what happened. So after the Revolutionary War, the Americans won, but now they had a country that they needed to run. And it's an enormous amount of work to administer any kind of organization, right? And a lot of pieces of the ways in which the British Empire was administered are just ways that you want to administer anything, right? You need someone to keep track of names and dates and numbers and all of that. So we chose to have some of the Brits stay in the United States, and they were supposed to remain here and help us administer our government. And this was actually an agreement with the monarch who we had just fought and defeated. He agreed to this. Yes, I'm going to have some of my guys stay there and help you run things, but you're in charge. They work for you. And over time, those servants, some through their own maliciousness, but others through just not knowing any better and doing what they were told by their superiors, came to start bossing us around. It's kind of like, let's say you hire an accountant for your business and that person works for you, right? And then they start to take over more and more of running things. And it can get to a point where maybe they're embezzling and maybe they've taken, practical control over your business because they have all this practical know-how and you need their help to run things. And now they're in control of the money. And, so you can see how someone who starts out and is supposed to be your servant can end up turning the tables on you, particularly if you have no idea, like we have had no idea, where we are supposed to be at in that hierarchy.
I just have one thing.
Yes, please.
When I signed I'm still in the process, I'm almost done, but when I signed this page with the red thing, I thought of the blood that was spent so much to try to get us free. And even though this is just red ink, it's not my blood, it made me just think of, the rights and errors and our bloodline and the wars that were fought so that we could have this kind of freedom and that we don't need to fight. So I just wanted to show that page because that's
absolutely
what you guys thought of when you did that. I mean, I also thought of the land, like common law and land, but
absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, well, and in the older ways, sort of, going back to what are called the northern tribes, the Germanic tribes, the Celts, they thought of things in terms of the red world and the green world. And so the green world was the plants, right? You cut them and like they bleed chlorophyll. And chlorophyll is actually really close to human blood as a molecule, which some of you have probably heard before. And then there's the red world, and that, and that's us. That's whoever bleeds red. And the reason that you sign with a red thumbprint is because it's designating you as a living person. You are not the fictional corporate entity that has been created. You are the real living person. You're saying, no, it's the real me. It's not, it's not Jana Jones. It's not Jana J. Jones. Well, I guess this is a really big topic because they also take our name and they created a fictional corporate entity, not just for Jana Jones, but also for Jana J. Jones and Jones, Jana. They've created fictional corporate entities repeatedly for us because each one of those generates more money, right? Like if you have one thing that's making more money and you can duplicate it by changing one letter, well, you'd probably do that.
So think about this. I have my birth name. I was married twice, and then I changed my name legally. Okay, so I've gone through 4 name changes, and every variation of my name, of all 4 of those names that you can think of, Elizabeth Ann Winninger, Elizabeth A. Winninger, E.A. Winninger. Okay, those are all going to go into corporation.
We're going to have more money.
Every variation of more money, every variation of my 2 married names. Okay, all of those combinations generated a QSIP number and added more money to this, this fund that is the fake me.
And every time you get like call it a high school degree, like
driver's license,
a bank account, anytime you get a new number, anytime you get a new entity or a new number or military or whatever you've done, many things as you've done, they're trying to make money on all of that. So you could be worth millions and millions.
Yeah, we all are, absolutely. So something else I want to cover from a historical perspective. So I talked about how, from a practical point of view, the British territorial government came to take over, right? Like being that, that crooked accountant. So then you might wonder, okay, well, where does the Catholic Church come in? The Catholic Church comes in two major ways. One is actually going back to the Catholic Church taking over all the land in England. So even the English monarch actually doesn't own the land in England. It's actually the church that has the authority over all the land in England. So the British territorial government, took over in the United States gradually after the Revolutionary War. It was a corporation, and it eventually went bankrupt. So what happens nowadays when a corporation goes bankrupt? Well, if it's a wildly successful one, some other corporation that has the means to take over it is going to come along and snap it up, right? That is what the Catholic Church did. When the British Territorial Government Corporation went bankrupt, which I think actually happened a couple times, but the last or most recent time was, I think, in 1933, which is why the introduction of the Social Security numbers and that registration system. And when they went bankrupt that time, the Catholic Church was the corporation that came in and took over. And what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So we all know about Washington, D.C. And I don't know if you knew this, but Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, is actually its own country. There are 3 cities in the world that are actually their own country. One is District of Columbia or Washington, D.C. The other is the City of London, which is not the same thing as London. The City of London, which is a corporation and is its own country. And the third one is Vatican City. So all of these 3 work together. So our zip code, right? When we write a zip code after our address, that is actually matching us up with the corporate office in Washington, D.C., to which we, as a citizen or servant of the government, belong. We don't belong to ourselves in that system. We are temporarily doing business wherever we are at. And so we put that zip code on the end, and that shows who we belong to in Washington, D.C. And, we've all heard this term resident, like, you move somewhere and you have to get residency. And you want to get residency because that's supposed to sort of legitimize your belonging in a place. But the definition of someone who's a resident or residing, it actually means that you are temporarily doing business in a place. So when I'm a resident, that means I'm temporarily doing business there. Who do I work for? Well, just look at my zip and you'll see who I belong to, who is based in Washington, D.C. This is a classic corporate system, right? There's a corporate headquarters in one place that all of the other corporate entities that belong to that home corporation, go back to. So is this picture kind of starting to come together for you ladies and making sense?
Yeah, go ahead, Karen.
Well, what's running in my mind now are 2 things that how does this tie in? And it may be, jumping ahead of the scale. And if that's the case, I'll wait for that. But one is census, how often census is being pulled and how is that tied into the system? And two is Social Security earnings. I'm reaching an age where I'm ready to draw on Social Security earnings. And how does that play in this new status?
Yes. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So I don't have a direct answer for your question about the census, but there's no, there's no question that this concept of a census goes back to the Roman civil law, the same as the Justinian deception. Because remember, in the story about Jesus, Mary and Joseph, right, they had to go back to where they were from because the Roman government, who had tyranny over the Jews, was taking a census. And this is interesting as well. And I won't forget about your Social Security question either. And I have good news on that. So the Roman Empire was not Christian until the very end, and even then it wasn't really Christian. But prior to Constantine's supposed conversion, it was their religion was the cult of the unconquered sun, which is why they changed the Sabbath, which had always been on Saturday, to Sunday, because it was the day of the sun, Sunday. And when the Roman Empire fell, anyone who is powerful enough and still well connected enough then became a higher up in the Roman Catholic Church. With your Social Security question, so this is really interesting. It's actually not you that has those Social Security earnings. It's the number. It's the number that has those earnings. So you still get that. You don't lose your Social Security by correcting your status. And I don't know the details yet, like more than that, or if there's anything else you need to do or a letter you need to write. I don't know anything about that, but I do know I've heard many times from people who are living it that you don't have to worry about losing your Social Security benefits. Yeah, I know. Woo! As far as the term like benefits goes, I will share that if you want to correct your status, then you can't be taking what is considered welfare from the state or corporate government. I and my kids were receiving food assistance, and I had to, have that stopped because yet another one of the undisclosed contracts that we entered into is that when we accept what is considered welfare from the municipal government, state of state, corporate government, then that is proving that we're a citizen.
I have a question. Does that include, does welfare include their like Medicare health insurance and like unemployment too? Do you know? We contribute to unemployment, and that's a credit to some degree. So
yeah, so that is a really good question, and I don't have a definitive answer for it. I do know that when I reached out to my state assembly and I asked about this, they said that if I wanted to stay on the state health insurance, that I could, but that I definitely need to get off of food assistance.
Sherry, go to the state assembly website. There's an FAQ, and we'll give you all this website also. And I believe that I read in there, if you've paid into something like Medicare, that you can receive it. Now, I don't know, it may or may not specifically address unemployment, but it probably does. So in the FAQs, it'll tell you like your Social Security, what benefits you retain because you paid into them.
Is the ones you paid into, you'll be able to get out, and the ones
Yes.
you haven't, but you can't be deemed a pauper according to Mr. Straight. So that the food assistance makes sense to me, because if you're deemed, you can't be a minor, a pauper, a citizen. There's like things that you shouldn't be and operate on your own, because if you go to court, they can deem you, if they deem you a pauper, then you're
Yeah.
yeah.
And
So-
Sharon had a question also.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ameera. Thank you, ladies, for bringing this information. Oh my gosh, it's so much. So I wanted to go back a little bit to the money that's generated for each of, all our names and understand, just have some clarity on that, because now, where does that money, it goes into a bank, correct? I mean, where does that money go? What is it, what happens to it? And I also heard something along the years about insurance policies, that banks have insurance policies on us or something like that. Does this have anything to do with this at all?
Thank you for your question, Sharon. So in my studies, what I have learned is that it's called a trust account. It's called a susta QV trust, which is a Latin term because of when they were established during the Crusades by the church, when Latin was sort of the official language. So our trust accounts are in the Federal Reserve banks, and I think there are 12 of them throughout the country. That might not be exactly right, but I think it's 12. So yeah, our trust accounts are at the Federal Reserve banks. And there are sort of legends of people who were able to somehow find their account number. And since they knew which of the banks it was in, they then had the routing number and were able to access those funds. However, it seems that whatever methods like those people used have changed enough that that same route is not available to us now. It is said that there is a way still to somehow claim your trust, or it's also sometimes called to claim your minor estate. But I don't know how to do that right now. But the Federation of American State Nationals, which is like the federal level of our state assemblies, they are working, like very actively working, making progress on a weekly basis on claiming the credit that's owed to us as Americans. And they are working to open banks for American state nationals, through which we will be able to access our credit. And another consideration when we think about wanting to get our hands on that money, which of course, like anyone would want that, one point that's been made to me is that, no, actually you don't want to be taking all of that money because so much of it is blood money. It was invested in ways that actually harmed mankind and harmed the planet. That's part of why it's going to work better for everyone, energetically as well as practically, to get our credit through the banks for American state nationals that the Federation is setting up for us. Okay, so I also want to talk about this word credit. So I think, most of us probably have woken up to the fact that to varying degrees, money isn't real, right? It's a representation. It works because we have enough of a consensus of its value. There's the term fiat currency, which is what our paper money is, meaning that, like, if I have a gold coin, that's actual currency. But, if I have paper money, that's fiat currency. So in a way, it's not that we're owed all this money, but rather we're owed credit. Like, you know, if you don't have something of intrinsic value, like gold or a skill, then everything else is really just credit, right? Money is just about credits and debits. So, you know, yeah, so the Federation is working to establish these banks so that we can get the credit that is owed to us, which is not exactly the same thing as dollar bills.
Is this have anything to do with Nasara or Gasara?
That's such
Okay,
a great
so-
question. That
Yeah,
because
thank-
to me, it sounds very similar.
Yeah, okay.
Because they're trying to now back our money with gold and other things.
Gold.
And it's
gold standard.
already starting. Can I add a few things?
Okay.
Yes, please.
If you want to look up where they're trading your numbers, you can go to GMEI Utility.
Can you type that in the chat?
Yeah, I'll type it in the chat. So they're trading me in Germany. They're trading so you can put in your birth certificate number, you have to do spaces. And then you can put in your social security number and you can do spaces. I don't know if I haven't tried putting in my bank account numbers and things yet, but you can look and see where they're trading you. I had like 172 under just one number, 172 like accounts under one of my numbers. And then about the blood money, I actually have this thought, which is open for discussion, but my thought when you said blood money, if we leave it with them, it's going to stay blood money. If you put it with us, it's could go towards preparing for the last days, helping other people. We could choose what we do with that money, and if we use it wisely or honorably. But I feel like if we leave it with them, it's already blood money and it can't be redeemed. But we could take it and we could give it to there's so many charities that are corrupt. So we could start our own projects, or we could find the ones that are funded privately by respectable individuals. So that's my thought on that. I wouldn't hesitate to take the money because it was blood money. I would just change it from blood money to something else to saving money. I don't know, that's my thought, but it's open for discussion. Like, what did you mean by blood money? And why would that, why would we leave it with people who use it that way anyway? I don't know.
Right. Well, so when we if we actually when that money becomes ours, or when the credit that is owed to us is actually credited to us, then that means it's no longer in their hands, so to speak. And Ameera, you can weigh in on this too. I don't know for sure, but I think that when we correct our status and we start to claim back our different names, that also claims our trust for us. It's like, letting the powers that be know that I know who I am now, and that's mine. But there are still, I think that there are still sort of measures in place to prevent us from being able to tap into that. And while the money is maybe the most exciting thing to hear about in this process, that there's, like this magical amount of money available for us, what's important is that we go through this process because of, and that our focus be about claiming our sovereignty and freedom, and letting the powers that be know that we know who we are. Because as long as we continue to do things where they can mistake us for being a citizen, then they will gladly do so. Every time we pay income tax, that's us showing, yep, I'm a citizen, because only a citizen would have to pay income tax. When we claim our children on our tax form, that is, that's another way of actually claiming them as government property, because we're entering them into a government form. We're saying that they're ours, but we belong to the government, which is why we're paying income tax. So you can see that there are all these, all these ways of being that we're just used to in our habits, and that we're, afraid to not do. We're afraid of what the consequences could be. And every time we do one of these things, it's like saying, yep, I'm a citizen. Yep, I'm a citizen.
We acquiesce
Exactly.
because we don't understand what we're agreeing to.
That's exactly right.
And even when I read the small print on my driver's license and it says that I agreed to that, what were the words? Something service, special service?
Oh, that's interesting.
I can go get it in the other room. I can read it to you. It says they could take me into the service. And I didn't know to cross it off, but makes me want to cancel that as soon as possible.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
I can go get it and read it if you want.
Yeah, it's nice to have more evidence. Something I do want to say though is that, so I was kind of saying like, oh, licenses are bad because that identifies you as a citizen. However, if you want to have a license for anything, maybe you are in a profession where you feel like if you let go of your license that, people just wouldn't understand and you would lose all your business. You can be an American state national and choose to keep your license, whether it's a driver's license or a medical license. And all that means is that you are signing up to be held responsible for all of the statutes and codes and bylaws that go along with that license. In fact, I'm not planning on giving up my driver's license right away. I have a friend, who's gone through this process and has been doing this for a long time. And he said, yeah, I still have my driver's license. What's important is how you sign it. Because if you sign your signature the right way, which is to write your full name with the copyright symbol after it, and then you write underneath that, all rights reserved, comma, without prejudice, then you are protecting yourself. What all rights reserved without prejudice means is that you are reserving the right to end or alter that contract if there are undisclosed terms that come to light. And writing without prejudice means that if you were to go to court, that the judge has to give you a full hearing. Prejudice comes from prejudge. Your case cannot be prejudged. They can't just treat it like, you know what I'm saying. Like you actually have to be given a full hearing.
And speaking of ID, Jana and I, because we completed correcting our status, have ID from the American State Assembly. We have our ID in our proper name, which is, for me, capital A, little M-E-E-R-A, capital B-E-T-H. Okay, this is my identification card with a barcode on the back that I have actually began to show around Kauai. Nobody knows what it is, but we have to educate, educate people when I go into the bank and they want ID. This is what I give them. And then I have to do a little explanation of what it is. I also am not ready to give up my Hawaii driver's license. This process kind of comes in layers. First, you correct your status, but just to get rid of everything we've been doing, and just jump into this whole new system is a little bit much. So for me, I'm gradually stepping through, transitioning, using my American States ID along with my Hawaii driver's license. When I went through TSA to get on a plane last week, I just didn't want to hassle. I just wanted to show them my Hawaii driver's license and get on my plane and go. Okay. But in time, as I get used to using this, I get more comfortable with it. Maybe more people have it. I'm allowing myself to go through the process of integrating into my new status and to my new identification. Okay. So you don't have to give it all up. You don't have to, jump ship from everything just because you correct your status. It's kind of like slipping into a bath of warm water or a bath of hot water. The other thing that's cool about this is that there is a barcode on the back, and if you scan it with a PDF app, it takes you to the American States Assembly website where this was issued. Okay, so it
Yeah.
actually, so if on this, one of the things that my ID says is that it's valid for all travel and identification purposes. I'm a peaceful private American, do not interrogate or detain, and that it's recorded lifetime visible. I can have a concealed carried weapons, all the things that are rightfully ours under our status. Okay, so if I were to get pulled over by a policeman, they would take me back to, if I said, this is my ID, it would actually take them to the American States Assembly that identifies me as a person who is no longer required to have a driver's license to be able to operate my personal automobile. There are actually only 3 instances where we are required to have a license to operate an automobile. Uber driver, federal worker, like a post office, or a commercial driver. If you are a person operating your personal automobile, we're actually not required to have a driver's license. Okay, so these are important things for you to know, because again, we've acquiesced to a system when we actually didn't need to. So now realizing that we have, bought in or allowed ourselves to be sold into a system where there was no requirement, you get to understand that this is also available to you. So whether you decide to hang on to your driver's license or not is up to you. I'm going through both right now as I make my transition into fully embracing my American states and state national status. I will also get, Sherry and I will also get a different passport. It'll be an American state national passport and our proper name, not our all caps name. Okay, so these are the things that I'm stepping into. And I know some of you also have questions on your business, like how do you transition your business from the public sector into a private sector, which is something that I am in the midst of doing right now. Yes, if you own your own business, you can transition your business over. And in about a month or so, I'm going to have my friend Erin Blair on, who is the one doing my private ministry association, or you can get a private membership association, which is allowing me to come out of public and into private. So I'll be collapsing my incorporation. I'll be canceling my corporation bank account and be running everything under my temple, which is my ministry. Now, you don't have to have a ministry. You can have a private membership association that is not an incorporation. It's not an LLC. It's something completely independent of anything that the state is affiliated with. I will have an EIN for my temple that is for banking purposes only. It is not connected to the IRS because, again, as a state national, I am no longer required to do taxes. Hooray! Right? Because I'm not a citizen anymore. Okay, so the rest of this information, the other piece of this, for those of you who are looking like, what do I do with my business? I'll have Erin on next month, and she'll discuss that in full about how you can do that and answer all those types of questions. But just know, like the American States Assembly, and I'm going to put the website in the notes. And Jana and I will next talk a little bit more about the process we went through paperwork-wise to get here. There's such a great infrastructure in place with the States Assembly that they teach you how to do it all. And most of it is extremely cheap or free. Because the people who are helping with this, the American States Assembly, the people who are the head of the assemblies, don't do this for the money. They do this as an act of service. Okay, they do this because they believe with every fiber of their living man or woman DNA that we are all entitled to this, that this is our birthright. And their act of service out into the world to all Americans is to help as many people change their status as possible without soaking you for a bunch of money. Okay, because that wouldn't be the right thing to do when you have a birthright, right, to be in, to be in this privilege. And so Jana and I, there are many different ways and people out there helping people do their paperwork. And so we will speak to what we did. What we found was the system we wanted to go through, the person we wanted to go through, and how we wanted to step into this process. So we both went through a website called My Status Select, right? Is that right, Jana?
I believe so.
And I'll look this up, and I'm going to put these websites in the notes too. Now,
Yeah,
by
I'll
no
check.
means is this the only way. It's the way we know, the way that has worked for us. We also got a lot of information from a man named David Straight. Okay, so I'm going to put his name into the notes. And if you go on YouTube and just Google David Straight, he does a seminar, a 3-day seminar, which there's 5 parts to. Day 1, part 1, you want to start there. You want to start with the AM session, day 1, where he starts to explain everything Jana and I are talking about. And so he also has a program that you can go through, and you can do, his method to change your status. But the reason we were recommending David is we learned a lot from him. I got my education about why I'm doing what I'm doing from his seminars. And so you want to watch, you want to take lots of notes. Much of it will be kind of a repeat of what Jean and I have talked about, but he'll expand, he'll go really into detail about everything having to do with, with the state and the state of state and your false name. So educating yourself in this process is job number 1. Okay, you've got to learn. You can't just take our word for it about whatever we have to say. You have to do your own research. You have to do your own education and make sure that you are entering into, whatever you're entering into, and know all the trade-offs that come along with this, because there are a few. And most of it, in my opinion, is like all positive. I'm all in, but it is out of the reality we're conditioned to, and the programming we're conditioned to. And outside of the programming, most of your family and friends are going to be conditioned to. So you also have to be ready for that. Okay, so maybe look up some David Straight videos and start learning from that. And then I'm also going to put in the American States Assembly website and our friend Evangeline's website from My Status Select, who prepared our paperwork for us. And Jana, I'm going to let you talk about My Status Select and the paperwork process.
Okay, great, thank you. So one thing I want to say about David Straight, so to find his video on YouTube that you want to start with, which is really the most important one, you should put in the search bar David Straight Day 1, and that is what will take you to the beginning of his presentation. He does an awesome job explaining the narrative and terminology. And, there's no question that his work I'm incredibly grateful for, because of how much it helped to, tell me the correct story and inform me. However, I personally cannot endorse his method per se, whether or not it's effective for people, because I've come across too many reports that he may be a charlatan. He also used to be a big supporter of the Federation of the Assembly of States, and he turned against that, and I don't know why. Obviously, I don't know him personally, and I'm not meaning to say anything bad about him. But as you will find with many sources of information, as you are working to educate yourself in this line of thinking, there are a lot of people where, the important thing is that you take in the information, and if they bring up sort of personal political persuasions or theories or something they're into that don't resonate with you, just ignore that. just take in the information for what it's worth. My Status Select, with mystatusselect.com, there's a wonderful woman named Evangeline who will help prepare your paperwork for you. You know how when we're operating in the corporate world, when we need paperwork prepared the right way, we hire an attorney. And while there are a few common law lawyers, there's basically no attorney paperwork type of service available that we have come across. So Evangeline is the closest thing. She will do your paperwork correctly, although you do have to make sure that you pay attention and you go through and make corrections. And if you are interested in having her do your paperwork for you, you should go to her website and fill out the intake form as soon as possible, because she's one lady and she does everyone's paperwork by hand. So you're putting yourself in a queue that could easily take a few months. I do want to show you what the documents look like, just so you get an idea kind of what, the start of what you need to file in order to correct your status. There's a form that's called your 1779, which I'm going to read this to you and after I go through these pages, because I think it's really powerful. So there's something called your 1779. There's something called the deed of reconveyance, where you are reconveying your name from the jurisdiction of the land. When you came out of the waters of your mother's womb, you were, and your birth certificate was registered, you became considered a vessel that was lost at sea. And so until you come home to the land and soil and show, I'm not lost, I'm not dead, I'm right here, I'm a living woman. Until you do that, you are considered a vessel that is lost at sea. So that's what the deed of reconveyance is about. There is a common carry declaration, which you do whether you want to have a gun or not. This is called the certificate of assumed name. This is where you are claiming back your name kind of as like your own business instead of someone else's business that they can make money off of. Okay, this is called the act of expatriation, right? So if you're an expat, it means that you left a country. So your act of expatriation is saying that you are leaving the country of the District of Columbia. You are now a foreigner to the District of Columbia because you are an American on the land and soil. And you do there, so some of these forms, you have to do one for each of your names. So I am just shuffling through here. I've had a lot of names, which is one of the reasons it's really nice to have Evangeline do your paperwork. Okay. This page is mandatory notice of the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, which I think was passed in the 1800s, but it's something that basically says that we all have the right to choose what our country is, to choose our nationality. So we're choosing our nationality as an American, not a British territorial subject, and not not part of the municipal or church government. This is important. This is the cancellation of all prior powers of attorney. When I think of a power of attorney, I think of that's something, you know, like when I'm old, I'll give one of my kids power of attorney so they can sign stuff for me. But actually, if you have ever hired an attorney in your entire life, you signed something that said that they could represent you in court. You gave them your power of attorney. And when we sign our power of attorney, when we hire a lawyer to represent us in court, we are actually designating ourselves as someone who is not able to take care of our own affairs. We're a pauper or an invalid, or we have, or a minor. You know, there's some way in which we are not fully able to take care of ourselves. That's what that actually means. And if that's the case, well, you know, if there's no one to, if there's someone who can't take care of their own affairs, then I guess that person would have to become a ward of the state, wouldn't they? So that's what, you know, that's why you want to cancel all your prior powers of attorney. And there's one of those for all your names. Okay, there is, this is called the paramount claim of life. This is like your real birth certificate, right? Because, you know, because we don't actually need a birth certificate. So this has your parents' names, and this is you claiming your own life. And then my last things I have, almost. So this is called a baby deed. This is like the real version of a birth certificate for your kids. So you are claiming your children. They are your property. That's why it's a deed. You know, your children are considered your property. And yes, you can do this even if the other parent doesn't agree, which is, you know, which is my situation. I'm claiming my 50%, you know, of my property and my children. And okay, the next two things, there's a form called a declaration of political status that you send to the Secretary of State of the United States. And that way it's on file with him. It's on file with the municipal government that you know who you are and you're an American state national. And that's giving these notices to the corporate government is essential. And you also send a form to the IRS, to the Internal Revenue Service, letting them know that you are revoking your election to pay income tax because it has always been an election. And you actually revoke your election to pay income tax going back 10 years. So while I personally don't have like some big debt to the IRS, I have heard that by going back 10 years, which is the longest amount you are allowed to go back, that is supposed to relieve you of debts that you owed because you were electing to pay taxes because you didn't know any better. And now you're revoking that election going back 10 years.
Go ahead,
So,
Jaden. We can't hear you. Unmute yourself.
Where is it? I don't know.
No, we hear you. We got you.
Okay, sorry. Does that mean you get your IRS money back too for the 10 years, or do you know yet?
yeah, that's something. Yeah, that's something that I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Just curious. Cool. I know I'm about to pay taxes. I don't want to, but I'm gonna do it next year. I'll be all ready.
Yeah.
Going through the process. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, Karen.
You're welcome.
Where's
One of the things coming to mind also as I'm hearing this discussion about the taxes is I currently have a son in college for which every year I have to file this FAFSA form that ties to my income taxes. So that kind of starts swirling into a convoluted web of what happens if I choose this status. I don't think I can have both. I don't think I can still have, like, he receives some, where are they? Subsidized and unsubsidized. What the heck are they? It's money for school because of going through this
Tuition.
FAFSA. Yeah, yeah,
Like
it's,
financial aid.
yeah, yeah. So from what I'm hearing you say, like when you were talking earlier about not being able to receive the benefits from government programs, I have a sense this would be tied into one of those non-applicable. So I'm getting a little steeped into how deeply rooted we're really tied into these systems.
We
Yeah, we
are.
are. I know,
Yeah.
I know, right?
Yeah.
When you start trying to extract yourself, then you realize how many strings there are. So I don't specifically know about the FAFSA and student aid. I mean, I feel like it's probably a question on the application where you have to check that you're a US citizen. However, sometimes I have a friend, and who's been living this way for years. He told me that there are some forms where he checks that he is a non-resident alien. Like instead of a citizen, and obviously there's no like American state national box. So, so I don't exactly know the answer to your question. I feel like there could be ways to get around it. That the way it's being done right now probably is, designating everyone as a citizen.
Can I ask one more kind of tie-in that is,
Yeah,
I'm
please.
processing so much as I'm listening to this. And again, I too thank you for taking the time to help educate. Here's another, I'm a retired federal employee. So does that start wavering into my annuity, my benefits, my health insurance? That all comes as part of a retired federal employee.
Yeah.
For me to pull out, I just want to see the big picture in all angles. If I were to choose to change my status, have I now put myself in jeopardy for all of these system things that I'm tied into as a retired federal employee?
Sure. Okay. So again, I don't have a definitive answer to your question, but I can share what I know. So someone who works for the government, like a federal employee, or if you are in the armed services, then you have to be a citizen for that. It is said that someone who works for the government can correct their status, and during the hours that they are working for the government, they're a citizen. And then the hours that they're not working for a government, then they get the benefits of the American state national. Although I don't personally know anyone who is living that. I don't know how it might affect your retirement stuff that's tied in with having worked for the government and being a citizen. But I'm glad you're bringing this up, because there are instances when someone might want to keep being a citizen. In a way, like there's nothing inherently terrible about it. What's terrible is when we don't know about our options, and we don't know the truth, and we don't know the whole story.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you were to, as you do your own research, find that you feel like, well, I just can't get out of all this stuff right now. Like it's my support, and it's what's grounding me. If being a citizen is working for you, and there are more benefits to that than to correcting your status, then there's nothing wrong with that. We all have to do what meets our needs.
Thank you.
Sherry, did you have a comment?
I did have a comment. So Trump is actually a national, And he took office as president of the United States, not as a citizen, but as a public servant. And he did it for free. So he didn't enter back into, because he did it for free, he didn't enter back into the corporation. So I could be a school counselor. I could fill out a W-8 form instead of a W-9, and I could be a school counselor, but at school, I'm not a citizen, I'm a public servant. So I would be answering the parents' calls and things like that if I'm able to get hired back after the mandates. And then I just had another thought. I stumbled, and I wish I could have had someone like Ameera do a call like this 2 years ago, because I have been wanting to be a national for 2 years and feeling a calling in my heart to do so. And it's totally fine if not everyone feels that calling. But it's what I was being led to do. And it would have been great to have an initial call like this. So thank you, Ameera, for doing this for everybody.
Yeah, you're welcome.
But
Yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, and many of you are part of the Temple of the New Atlantis, and thank you. For those of you who are here by invitation, thank you so much for being here and trusting me and taking part of this. And I do want to invite you, like these kinds of topics, we won't always talk about, you know, this type of like politically charged whatever. I do talk about a lot of things that are very spiritually enhanced also. So if you're looking for a community to be with where this kind of information I'm trying to make available to my group, you know, to my temple members, I'll invite you to join. You can go to templeofthenewatlantis.org and take a look at the website and the language, and just decide if my energy and if the energy of the temple is something that resonates with you. If so, you know, awesome. You know, register and join us. I'm a private ministry association, which means that you and I have an agreement to be together in this setting, in a private setting, not in a public setting, outside of any state, you know, state or government overreach. It's like we're sitting in our own living room together, conducting our private business. I hold gatherings like this once or twice a month on all different topics. I keep our calls typically very proprietary to temple members, because again, it's an agreement that you and I have to come together in a private setting. Occasionally something like this, I feel like it's so important that like this information get out to people, so you know what's available to you, that I open it up a little more publicly. But in general, it is something, you know, and Jana is a trustee on the temple with me, and you're doing such a fantastic job of presenting this. Like,
thank you,
girl, just over the top, and Jana is actually practicing to be able to do this as her public service to her fellow Americans, and literally help people through the process. So this is kind of her coming out party, I guess, if you will, practicing of sharing information. And really, you're doing such a great job that I'm just thrilled that we're doing this, and that we both get to, you know, the temple is my active service to the world. That's what it is. And so each of us at some point step into our higher calling, if we want to, our higher dharma, and what we really want to do on a global spectrum. And that's what the temple is for me. So long story short, if you feel like you would like to become a part of this community, templeofthenewatlantis.org, I tell all your friends, we need to build this out. Like, these are the kind of communities that we need to have and to co-create together to bring forward what I call, you know, the new Atlantis, right? And the law of one. What you see behind me is called the American Civil Flag of Peace. So most people, we think about the United States of America, we think about the stars and stripes, right? We think that's the flag. Well, all the links we have shared with you all fly the civil flag of peace. The civil flag of peace is a peace flag. The stars and bars. The stars and stripes is actually a war flag. When we fly the stars and stripes, we're actually declaring war, that we're at war. Okay? we think we're patriots. We think we're doing something patriotic, but actually what we're doing is declaring war. Okay, so I have put down the stars and stripes, and I have adopted the civil flag of peace, which states that I am a person at peace. I mean, I even bought the hat, right? Bought the hat, bought the hat, bought the t-shirt, you know, and this is the flag that I fly under now. And so as you go deeper into the rabbit hole of exploring what all this means, and everything that is available to us, you know, you'll understand that the more we anchor in foundationally, like being recorded on the land and soil is what creates your status as an American state national. It takes you out of the jurisdiction of water, which is the lowest jurisdiction there is, and puts you in the jurisdiction of land, okay, which is the higher jurisdiction. And then the supreme, I think, is air. Okay, so if you don't do the foundational paperwork and be recorded on the land and soil, and I'll also take my documents and I can record them in the Kauai Land Recording Office. Okay, so Kaden, you can go to Maui to the land recording office once you have your documents. Okay, you could all go to your land recording offices in your county and have your paperwork recorded, which legitimizes you even further, okay, as being of the land and as a being living soul. And then you fly your civil flag of peace, and you know, all the physical representations, all the legal representations are what anchor us into this, you know, this new truth or new reality. Every state has a state assembly. Some states are better and well organized than others. Like Jana's in Washington State, they have a kick-ass assembly. They're super organized. They hold, you know, maybe monthly meetings. They have a great leader there, and it's all going very well. Hawaii has a state assembly leader. Her name is Jennifer Perry. They have no recording secretary. This is why we go through Evangeline. And it's kind of coming together. They're not as fully prepared as Washington is. I know California's got an assembly. Ohio, I'm not sure of. And some of the states do a terrible job. Some of them are doing a very, very good job. I know California State Assembly is pretty strong. They have a pretty well organized, I think there's actually a couple of different assemblies or organizations there in California, but just know that you have that as a resource also to potentially reach out to. Jana and I are here for you. The American States Assembly is run by Justice Anna von Reitz, who is a very dedicated American to helping all Americans understand this. She does monthly webinars that Jana and I listen to regularly. They're free. We learn so much. This is where we're learning about not only the history of how we got here to where we are at, we are also learning about the banking system that they're putting in place for us. We're going to have our own banking systems, you know, our own organizations to go to, our own vendor cards that they're working towards. And some of these things are months or maybe more out, but they're coming. Like they're really putting together something for us that is concrete, something physical of the land. And the other thing that I really love about the States Assembly is that I noticed on the back of my card that there's a little mini Metatron's cube in there. There's 13 little stars in that configuration.
Yay, that is so cool. Let me see.
Which totally, you know, which
that's cool.
You know, which totally rang my bell, right? And I think the 13 are probably representative of the 13 original colonies, but the way they have it configured is and Metatron's cube, again, remembers the Platonic solids. It's that's what creates our physical reality. So whether that was, you know, somebody's intentional creation or whether it was all divine, I don't know. But the deeper you go down through the rabbit hole and the more you go into how this has been put together for us, the more you realize how freaking divine It really all is.
I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but I just have this gut, like you have to say this. So you just want to be really purposeful in what you're doing though, because some people have gotten in trouble. Like if you're going to say, I'm not going to use my social security number anymore, and then you go and use it, or if you don't take control of all 3 of your jurisdictions, some people have gotten into some trouble. So you just really want to study, and I'm still studying. I don't want to be rain on anyone's parade. I just think you really should, like, I haven't chosen I use David Straight's paperwork, but everything I do myself. And so I have to take full responsibility for what I'm doing. And
Yeah, and that's another way you can do this is like Sherry went and she did all her own paperwork, which is like, I couldn't have done that. Like,
oh my gosh, I almost didn't want to tell you guys I did it that way, because I don't want people coming to me and then me being their liability when I'm already taking on a lot of liability on my own.
And this is why Jana and I say we're going to offer you the information, okay? But it is up to all of us to do our own research, to get our own education, and really decide how to move forward if you're going to move forward. And then we can be, resources for you. Like leaders do what? Go first. So we're trying to help create a map, trying to help pave a way or pave a direction by our own trial and error, by our own learning experience that others can choose to follow. Or, maybe you'll find a better way, or maybe you'll find something else that we didn't. And that makes us all learning together. Right?
Being a part of the group is usually better. I just have been led my own path, and I did use David Straight's paperwork. And when people are, I just also wanted to say, when people are David Straight or Anna von Reitz, they're gonna have people that take big black markers and try to paint all over in bad things. And so when I hear bad things about either one of them, I kind of have to listen to.
Well, and you went and saw David Straight when he came to Kauai, like you took his seminar.
And I would recommend his $80 Utah seminar on his website, because it has a lot of good information no matter which route you go. And there's documents in there about how to travel. So there's like 20 documents on that flash drive. And when I put them into different folders, there's a packet this thick on your rights to travel without a driver's license. And then there's 5 things about your Seska QB trust. And then there's a lot of documents in there. And then his website were the forms that I used when I did it. But anyway, I don't think he's a charlatan. I think he knows the law well enough that he can weasel his way around a lot of it, but I don't know. I guess we just
I don't know that he's a charlatan either. I think with everybody who's a public figure in that way, like you said, there's always going to be like really good reports, and there's always going to be like sketchy ones. And again, you have to follow your own guidance. As far as information goes, the guy will teach you a shit ton. Like Jean and I learned it just blew us wide open.
Learn from both of them. I have an Anna book and I've read it.
Yeah.
Learn everything you can and then do what feels right to you. But
right, exactly.
It's not a bad thing. I think it's great you guys have this group formed. I'm just feeling that a different way is all. But
yeah, to get to the same destination.
I'm just going to use my passport.
Yeah.
Instead.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question. So did you, with David Straight's paperwork and method, do you record that anywhere? Like when you said, I'm just going to use my passport, does that mean like you just use your passport, you send notice to the government, and then you don't have to record it?
Okay, so I have my paperwork ready. I have already sent it to the Secretary of State, and I've already had the 21 days. So now I'm just waiting for my cousin to get on board with the patent of nativity being correct. And then I'm going to fly to the Big Island, have everything signed on the land affidavit. I added my own thing.
That's cool.
So there's all these official looking documents, and then I'm going to put some typing over this that says my feet are on the land. So that's the one I added. I know it looks like kindergarten, but all the other stuff looks super official. So what I'm doing is I'm going to go record that on the land myself, and I'm trying to decide where, if in Utah or in Hawaii, but there's a land recorder's office. And there's on Davis Straight's website, he says every state's locations on there. So I'm going to go record it myself. And then he teaches how to fill out your passport thing. So I've already filled out my passport. It's ready to go. So I'm going to fly to the Big Island, have my cousins help me with my affidavits, and then I'm going to fly to Oahu. I might send my land paperwork to the land recorder and then go straight to the passport office. But I just have to wait for everything to kind of line up.
Yeah,
But
patience with this process. Patience is number one. So one thing about working with Evangeline that Jana and I and many others who've worked with her have realized is she is one living woman trying to do this immense act of service herself. She has, well, when we talked to her, Jana witnessed my paperwork recording with her. I had two witnesses witness my recording, Jana and another friend. And she mentioned she had 150 people in her queue. Okay. So she's slammed with business. So once you fill out the intake form, and then you'll get an invoice a few days later to pay $75. That's what we paid. Super cheap, right? That's all she charges. You might wait some weeks or some months. I think it took me 6 or 8 weeks before I heard back about my paperwork. And I did inquire. I'm like, my paperwork, is it around? And she's just like, and she had a death in her family, and she had some things that were happening. And it took probably 2 full months before I got my paperwork back to review. And I just had to surrender to the process and recognize that all things come in their timing, and me getting manic about it, like it wasn't the end of the world, that I had to have it done now, right? And Jana kind of experienced the same. You kind of have to hurry up and wait. And she got back to me with my paperwork. There was a few corrections that needed to be done. And then immediately we booked a Zoom appointment. Jana got on, my other girlfriend got on, and they witnessed my signing and my thumbprinting. And they both had to know me 10 years was kind of the prerequisite. You have to know somebody who knows who you are for 10 years. And we went through this whole thing together. I got to sit with 2 of my closest friends as they witnessed my emancipation, from this old system and stepping off into this new timeline. And it was extremely exhilarating. And it was very precious to have my 2 friends, because anytime you have a witness to something, to a ceremony, it was like a ceremony. When you have a witness to a transition in your life, then that just makes it so much more meaningful. So my other option would have been I could have gone to a notary public, and the notary could have just signed off. But I chose to have witnesses. I chose to be witness through this because it is kind of a rite of passage. So all in all, it took about 8 weeks or so, I would say, to get to the other side of my paperwork, which in the grand scheme of things is not a big deal, right? A couple of months, right, to get all this done. And what that will enable you to do is to continue educating yourselves on all the next steps that you will want to take once you have corrected your status. Get some information on how you'll eventually transition your business if you have one. Get some information on, how you'll create a passport for yourself, because there's a lot of steps to that too. Start listening to webinars. The worst thing that's going to happen is if you get your paperwork after a month or 2 once, or however long it is, and you go, oh my God, this is not for me. The worst thing that's going to happen to you is you'll be out $75. Okay. So think about that. If you come across some kind of information at the end, or you chicken out, okay, because I got my paperwork back from her, and I was like, oh my God, I'm really doing this. Can I do this? Should I do this? What is it? Like, I had a freak out moment, right? And I think I had to call Jana, and I was like, I got my paperwork. Like, should I? Because the programming is like, man, the programming is just so deep in there. And the fear that is in you to know that I have my cancellation, my rescinding to the IRS. Like, can I really sit down to the IRS? And Jana said something to me very interesting yesterday. She said, the Inquisition never really went away. Y'all remember hearing about, the Catholic Church's Inquisition? It never went away. The Inquisition became who, Jana?
They became the IRS. And
Okay.
income tax started being levied on the public at the same time that everyone was told you have to register for a social security number, which was the same time that the British Territorial Corporation had gone bankrupt and the Catholic Church swept in and took it all over. So it's all been coincidence, I guess.
So for all of you who know you've had past lives being tortured and interrogated by the Catholic Church, no wonder we're fucking terrified of the IRS.
I just want to insert one more thing. That's also the first atomic bomb, 1945, and that was when JFK was murdered and the Greys appeared in the. I mean, they've been here a long time on Earth, but they're
yeah.
Anyway.
So the trauma and the programming is, I mean, it's many lifetimes and layers deep, right? And so it takes a lot of courage to step up and reclaim ourselves and reclaim our power and reclaim our sovereignty and say no more. You know, I will be a slave no more.
Yes, I
did meditations this morning where I went back to torture. So that's interesting that you said that. And my gifts that I got at the end of the meditations were my soul. I got an eternal soul. And so it's like fitting right along with like the timing of this. So it's cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, you know, I feel like just educating yourself and doing research as far as you want to go with it is always a win, because even if you correct your status and then you decide that you want to go back to being a citizen, you can always do that. You can always do that if you want.
Yeah, and the whole process, paying Evangeline, publishing and recording my paperwork, getting my credentials cost me $175.
Right.
Okay, so you will not go in debt over this process.
Yeah,
which
it's
is
not like hiring
a
an attorney.
really important part, like the integrity of the system. You know, a system is an integrity when it doesn't ask you to go in debt to be a part of it.
Yes.
Anybody can afford it.
Some people are charging thousands of dollars to learn
Bye,
how
Karen.
to do CMA, so
Hi, Karen.
great.
And you know, a couple of you are filling out your intake forms right now. You're like on it, looking into it. That's great. If you have questions, if you get stuck on something, feel free to reach out to me. I mean, I'll help you as best I can with what knowledge that I have or what help I have to get you, to get you moving.
Yeah, same here. You can reach out to me as well. I'm on Facebook as Jana Jones, and my website is janajoneslivingwoman.com.
And I will send out a recording of this first part of next week for you to review. I don't usually say this, but I am going to say, feel free to send this recording to anybody you feel might be interested. Okay. Most of our temple talks are proprietary, and I ask you to keep it proprietary to yourself, or maybe your immediate family or somebody like that. But something like this, if you know of someone who would like to learn and can benefit, by all means, share.
Can I share something kind of off topic?
Yeah.
But is relatable? I have a client that I've been working with that channels George Washington and some of the forefathers. And we were doing some work. Oh God, I'm getting chills. We were doing some work maybe about a month ago, and George Washington came through and he said, we screwed up. We didn't finish and do everything the way we should have. And that is why the country is in such a mess now.
They left some loopholes, and I don't think they meant to. They didn't mean to, because they didn't conceive of the possibilities. Like, there were just possibilities they couldn't imagine because of the time, the day and time, and also because they just didn't think so much maliciousness was people that was going to be maliciousness and intent at that level.
And he also, and that those were almost his exact words too.
Thank you. I heard it. Like I
Yep.
heard it.
Yep. And he also said they let the foxes into the chicken coop,
Yes.
and was probably the guys you were talking about.
Yeah. It was a
Brits that they
complete
have.
naive, just, yeah.
Yeah. It's just, I had to share that because it
Yeah,
was
thank
like,
you.
oh my
Thank you.
God.
So we are,
Thank you.
you know, we are, when you talk about a second government or the second revolution or whatever you're talking about, we're it. The American people are it. Like, I mean, if you all know me, you know I supported President Trump and all of his, this is what he was talking about. It's up to the American people. He restored the republic, right? He did that, turned it all over to us. And when he lost, it was going to be, and I, you know, it was going to be about, he knew that we had to take it from here, that we had to stand up as Americans and figure all this shit out and unravel it. And there is a second American government coming up. We are it. And I can tell you from working with the assembly that the assembly is mostly conservative women, okay, conservative. And the second government will be put in place predominantly by spiritually attuned, mature women. On these webinars, Anna von Reitz and Terry, who's the head of the state assembly, they talk about Moon Atlantis. They talk about tribal communities and the return to that. They speak our language. They understand from a very primal level that this is something that is happening, that is correcting many, many timelines and realities, not just this one. Okay, so I can say with my whole heart that this organization has a lot of integrity and direction, and that I see now how the second government is going to rise up and come into play. We will have to segregate. We will have to separate. It will be a new Earth, Atlantis, a new community coming forward while the old one crumbles. And those who are staying in the old system, okay, the old way of government, as that falls away, we are what is up and coming. Now, I'm not saying if you don't become an American state national, you don't become a part of the new Atlantis or a part of the new government. That's not what I'm saying. But those of us who are doing it are enhancing this timeline. We're carrying this timeline into the physical as the forerunners. There's probably somewhere between 40 and 50,000 American state nationals right now. I don't know the exact number, but I expect that to blow up in this decade.
David Straight said there's 1 million last summer.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
When I did the math, though, that's 0.003%.
Yeah, that's not very many. Okay, so let's say there's 1 million of us, right? I expect that through this decade, that number, it's going to absolutely blow up. Yeah.
Well, Trump said we're going back to little letters. So some of my friends are just waiting for that. I'm not saying to wait, but anyway.
Something I want to bring up is this idea of our state assemblies. So you don't have to be part of your state assembly in order to correct your status. The reason why there's encouragement to be part of the state assemblies is because we want to return from the corporate law system, which is really all about commerce and money, as we've noticed, to the common law system. And if we are going to be able to have our own enforcement of our common laws, we are going to need our own juries. And we want to have jurors who are educated, who really understand the law. And those jurors are going to be pulled from our assemblies.
Another really cool thing I learned on the webinar is the word militia. What do you guys think of when you hear the word militia? Like the outlaws with the guns, right? The survivalists who are like banding together, hiding up in, northern Idaho, waiting for, right? Okay, so the true definition of a militia is a group of people in a community who have designated themselves as to be the ones who provide emergency support. If there is a fire, if there is a natural disaster, something happens in the community, the militia is the group of the community who provides the first aid, who provides the support, who fixes and rebuilding things, who takes care of the community in emergency situation. Militia has been maligned by corporations, like everything else. Okay, so we're unlearning, we're unraveling, and we're unlearning all this bullshit and all these wordsmithing, you know, that has gone on through corporations that has programmed us to think a certain way.
Yes, in a true militia. Yes, the militia is us.
Yeah.
The militia, having a well-organized militia means that if there's a natural disaster, that I walk out of my house and everyone in my family has a, like our 72-hour, backpack for being prepared to go without running water and electricity. And me and all my neighbors know the meeting place that we can get together and assign roles. And all of us as individuals have skills such as first aid, engineering skills, whatever it might be, so that we can all take care of each other, so that we're not waiting around for help to come, from FEMA or some other kind of corporate government organization. It's really about us taking care of ourselves and being there for one another and doing the trainings such as CERT training, which stands for Community Emergency Response Training, which the Washington Assembly is encouraging people to do. So that we can take care of ourselves and each other. That's what a militia is meant to be. And as far as having guns, well, being able to defend ourselves and defend our families and our neighbors, if there is a threat, then that's just one piece of the pie of being able to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, I was a part of a spiritual call recently, and there was a lot of talk about her story. And I'm, of course, like, power for the women, but I just want to also recognize there's a lot of really good men out there, strong protective instinct type men that I'm really happy we have on this earth. But women have been suppressed throughout our generations. And as we heal that up and we rise up, we have a place in that. And it's interesting because I felt to go to Costco. I didn't really need anything. And I ran into this book called Her Story. And it was the only one, and it was out of place. And I went back and looked, there were no stacks anywhere. And I look at the books at Costco often. It was the only one I've ever seen there in the last month. And it's in the other room, but it's called Her Story. And it's just a kid's book about like 30 great women and the differences that they've made. And there are more women state nationals, like Ameera said. And so we do have a place to band together and be like-minded. And even if you do or don't become a national, just to be like-minded and know what's going on is awesome.
We've hit the 2-hour mark, and I feel like it's probably time to let everybody go. But before I do, Jana, is there anything else that you want to share, or does anybody else have any quick questions or comments or anything to put out there?
I think this is good for today.
Okay, very good. You did phenomenal.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This has been absolutely like,
Yeah.
love it.
Thank you, Jana.
It is. That's how I felt.
All right. Very
Bye.
good. And with that, I'll give you all the mahalos for being here and for trusting us and for listening and allowing us to express ourselves. I'll have this video out. I think I'm going to turn it into a YouTube just for simplicity's sake and privatize it. I'll send this out the first part of the week so that you have it. and that you can offer it to, to anybody who you feel might benefit. Everybody have a great weekend.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Aloha.